Okay, Jim, do you want to give us some information about the logistics for the conference, the study weekend we're going to have in Selkirk's beginning this weekend, and then David James will provide information about what we might be able to expect.
Okay, I'll try and be brief on this to make sure that we get to the important part, the butterflies. First of all, thank you to David for going up there and scouting and doing all this, and your co-pilot who hasn't gone up there yet, but Dave Nunnally has, I know, been a big help to you on that. First of all, meeting time and place. We're going to meet at Medellin Falls Visitor Center at about 6-ish on Friday night. We'll be there for registration, paperwork, and some snacks, and hopefully be redirected to where we need to go for David Dropper's mothing. What should you bring? I would recommend bringing a chair, a camp chair of some sort out there. There are a few picnic tables, but very limited. And silent auction items. If you have any silent auction items, please bring them and make them available to Dan Dumfrey to get them set up. Next item, the species list that was mailed out. It's the newest, best, up-to-date one, as developed by Dave Nunnally and John Pelham. And if it isn't correct, then I don't know where we're ever going to get a better one. But it is also, when I printed my copy out, it's when I did a landscape, it covered 5 pages. So I'm going to try and build a specific one using Dave Johns and David's information and bring that on up to the conference. But I would recommend bringing your species list if you want it. And the last, we got about 35 to 40 people registered. And be mindful on this, those Forest Service roads, sometimes if there's 35 cars on it, it might be kind of a traffic jam in the woods. We are okayed for up to 75 people by the Forest Service, but we want to be good guests while we're up there. And the last thing, just so everybody's aware, our current Saturday night pizza status is somewhat in flux. We do have a good backup plan, and I will make sure that that is in place before anybody else is up there. I will be up there early and taking care of that detail, as well as presenting to some little kids at the library. And I think that's about it, unless anybody has any other questions, please feel free to email me. I'll get right back to you, or call me. My info is on the website. So with that,
just one quick question.
do you want it to go back to you, or do you want it to go to David?
Well, hang on a second. We have a question. Go ahead. Is it Alex?
Yeah. On Saturday and Sunday, what time are we gathering together to go out to the place?
I think David James has got a better handle on that one.
Okay.
It's usually, we'll meet at the probably at the hotel there, the Historic Washington Hotel. And typically we meet about 9 o'clock, but David will give you the.
I think that sounds reasonable.
Greatest.
I mean, we haven't fixed it, I don't think, but 9 sounds good to me.
So you think that's okay for heat and all that? You don't want to get started any earlier,
Um, I don't know. What do you think, Dave? It's usually 8:30 to 9. I mean, you know,
We might be able to use another hour in the morning. It's that first day, I think, is our hottest, isn't it? Let's see what
No, it's not.
the temperatures have been dropped down a little bit. First day is 95. No, Friday is 96 degrees. That's our hottest day. So,
So
yeah. we might-
Saturday's better.
Hmm?
Saturday's better.
So, maybe 8 might be better. I don't know. Get us a little extra time there.
So Alex, does that constrain you any? Are you coming from a long distance on Saturday or Sunday?
I'm coming up on Friday. I just wanted to, you know, the breakfast places are kind of limited up there, so I just don't know what time those breakfast places open. That's all.
Okay. So what do you think, Dave's 8 o'clock is what we're talking about then?
I think we should split the difference and go for 8:30.
Let's do that. That sounds like a great plan.
I'm
8:30
actually, the family and I are actually staying at Colville, so
Oh,
right.
my.
Whoa,
couldn't get in at Ione, which I planned to, and so I need a little bit of time.
wow, that's a long ways.
Less than an hour,
Oh, boy.
but it's okay.
That'll work out for you, okay, David, to
Yeah,
meet at
yeah.
8:30? Okay. All right, any other questions or concerns or things we should talk about before David gets started with his presentation?
Just let's make sure Melanie at the registration table that Friday night, we need to remind people when and where we're gonna meet,
On Saturday and Sunday, yeah, okay.
or on Saturday, Sunday.
Anything else?
No, I'll
Okay.
be quiet now.
Take it away, David, thank you so much.
Okay, I'll go and share my screen. I hope you can see the screen, everybody.
It says you started sharing, but I don't see anything yet, David.
It says your screen share is loading.
Here it's come up, yeah, we see it
Right.
now.
A while
So,
to load.
You might, yeah, there you go, yeah, it's perfect now.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming and listening to this preview of what is there right now and what we hopefully will see. As I just mentioned, you know, it's beginning to go past prime time there, and with the heat, it's probably going to be further past prime time. But you know, the heat, new emergencies will occur, new eclosions will occur, new butterflies will appear. And so it's difficult to say. There'll be some species that I'll say tonight that I saw we probably won't see because some of the species were pretty much at the end of their flight season, probably being fairly warm. But there'll be others that appear, I think. So it's a challenge to choose the locations, and Dave's going to help. Dave Nunnally's going to help by going up there earlier than I will be on Thursday. To check out a couple of other locations, but so I think we will see at least 30 species, maybe as many as 40. I saw 37 last week, and that was just me and Annabella, my 12-year-old. So, and we were very rushed, of course, going around different places to try and find the best spots. So I didn't spend much time at each location. So, you know, we might see more than 40. So there's plenty of species there, and the abundance is pretty good too. I'm just a bit worried that this heat will, you know, send things down a bit. One guarantee, you'll see the Lord Queen's Admiral. They seem to be the species of the moment. Well, at least last week they were the species of the moment, a bit like the pale swallowtail was last year in the Blue Mountains. Lord Queen's Admirals were everywhere at every site, not in huge numbers, of course, but they were the constant companion for us last week. So we went for 2 days last week, Wednesday and Thursday, me, Annabella, and the rat boy dog called Arlo. The Pend d'Oreille landscape is drying out rapidly in some areas, particularly the Tiger Meadows area, which I was hoping would be the best place we'd go to, but now it's an also ran, and maybe we don't go there at all, depending on what Dave finds on Thursday. It will still be okay, I think, particularly within the forest area. There's a meadow area out of the forest that's drying rapidly. Inside the forest, the openings there are still fairly moist and flowery, like this picture here is one of them. And as I say, the butterfly populations were good last week. Some locations may not be by coming weekend, and we may see some additional species that I didn't see last week, and I'll mention those as well, the possible species we may see. So the provisional plan is Saturday, a place called Smackout Pass Road. I love that name, Smackout Pass. It's west of Ione. I've never been there before. Dave Nunnally put me onto it. And it is by far the lusher area at the moment compared to the Tiger Meadows area, which is south of Ione, southwest maybe. But it seems a lot drier in the Tiger Meadows area. So Smackout, I can't say it, but Smackout Pass Road is fairly moist at the moment, or it was, and I don't think it can dry that rapidly so that it will become brown within a week. The good news is the roads, the forest roads are well maintained, particularly in the Smackout Pass Road area, and so there's no real problem. There's the occasional pothole here and there, but mostly they're pretty good. And we're not going to be driving that far compared to the Blue Mountains last year, if any of you remember that, where we drove like 80 miles, I think. I don't think we'll do 20 miles on Saturday, and probably less on the following day, depending where we go. So Sunday at the moment, there's a road called Boundary Road that's west of Metaline and Metaline Falls. It sort of runs all the way to the Canadian border, or virtually to the Canadian border. I didn't spend a lot of time there because I was running out of time, but I found a few places that were good, and I think Dave might be checking out that road area. So that's potentially where we'll go on Sunday, and maybe the Tiger Meadows area as well, if we don't find enough on Boundary Road. And Dave might come up with something completely different. So this is a provisional plan, but I think Smackout Pass Road would be hard to beat. And most of the sites there are power line openings or clearings, where they, the cuts that the power line people make to maintain the power lines, and they're very flowery and obviously kept at a stage where it is mostly flowers, and butterflies are abundant in that area at the moment, or they were. And so this is a shot of probably the best area. You can't see many flowers in that shot, but believe me, there are a lot of flowers in there. And again, I have experience. We had a Wobber field trip at First Creek in the Risa Creek area at the weekend, and the flowers had improved and increased greatly in just 5 days from the previous. I went up there previously 5 days before, and I think the same will happen up here, where we'll see more flowers than I saw last week. So this area here is, blooming with flowers and butterflies. And the other good thing about this is that there is some refuge there on the right in those trees. There's actually a forest road that goes into the trees, a deep, dark forest, where I think we can park our cars and be in the shade if people need to be in the shade, and venture out into the sun, assuming it's very hot. So I think this area has the best of both worlds. It's at 3,400 feet. And there are other cuts, power line cuts as well, that we could visit if that wasn't good enough, but I think it will be. And also in the same area, a bit lower down, there's a Meadow Lake area. That's the lake. But the thing about that is it's surrounded by these lush meadows. And obviously the lake is making sure that they remain fairly lush. So this is what it looked like last week. And again, many butterflies flying in this area. I didn't spend as much time here, but I feel confident that, you know, it will be a good place to go to. It might have more people. The first place is we're unlikely to be disturbed by many people, but this site here may have, you know, picnickers for the lake, etc. But it might still be worth visiting, going to in the afternoon of Saturday. And there's a bit of the flowers, and there's the rat boy dog wondering where the butterflies are. So Boundary Road, Ione, gets the thumbs up from Annabella. Actually, she was very hot at that point. It was hot. But as you can see, it's a flowery road at one point. This isn't Boundary Road. This is a forest road off of Boundary Road, pretty well maintained. And it doesn't go for very far. But what there is of it, there's I think there was about 20 species just on a half-mile stretch of road here. You know, for this weekend, we always like to choose a place that's got something unique. And so the uniqueness of this area, the Ponderay County, I believe, well, I know, and I look forward to seeing the fritillaries. I have to say fritillaries if I want to be American. I don't really want to be, so I'll stay with fritillaries. Can't even say it now. And skippers. There's different fritillaries there, and you know, different skippers that we don't normally see in other parts of the state. There's at least 5 skippers, 4 skippers anyway, that are pretty unusual, that I'll talk about. So, you know, these are the groups that were, you know, pretty unique for this area. There's others too. There's the Edith's copper. I'm getting ahead of myself now, but so Sunday, possible Tiger Meadows area. This is another one of the openings in the forest. Bella and I and the dog did see a bear crossing the road, a bear cub running across the road. So that was exciting. So there are bears in the area. We were in the car at the time, so it didn't really worry us that much. And I didn't see the mother bear at all. I'm sure she was around. This is another opening, more of a skipper habitat. So you can see this sort of green opening is not going to dry up in a week, however hot it gets up there. And this had quite a number of skipper species. So, you know, Tiger Meadows still has potential. This is the area along the road. I can't remember the number of it. I think it's 20, goes to Colville. And then, so you can see it's drying up here. And normally this area is very good for butterflies. And it was still okay last week, but may not be so much this coming week. And particularly down over in the middle down there, it's usually moister, and it wasn't, I mean, it is a bit moister than up on the hill, but it's drying rapidly, and there's usually skippers down there. And there's another wet patch further along the road, which is still wet. So it's drying out in places, I guess is the best way to describe it. So we want to find optimal places. So this may be one of them, but it may not be. So, okay, so that's a bit of the background. Now I'll go through the 37 species I saw over those 2 days, plus species in each family we may see because they are going to emerge, or I just didn't hang around long enough to look. And of course, when we have a group of 30 people or whatever, we're always going to find more species than a single person alone. It's just inevitable. So I really think, you know, we could get 47 species if we're optimistic. So could be exciting. So, okay, starting with the swallowtails. I only saw 2 swallowtails. It's not a swallowtail weekend. If you love swallowtails, you will see western tiger swallowtails and a few pale tiger. I only saw 1 or 2 pale tigers, but again, maybe they're a bit late. Probably not actually, but they're there, but not in huge numbers. Western tigers were in quite large numbers in all the places I went to. So we're guaranteed to see western tiger swallowtails, but then you don't need to leave Seattle to see them, I suppose, but it's always good to see them. Two-tailed, I didn't see any two-tailed. So the previous 2 swallowtail species are the ones I saw. Two-tailed we might see. It has been recorded from the southern Ponderay County, but it's probably a long shot to see two-tailed, but we should obviously check to make sure. Probably something that's probably more interesting and And a bigger reason, a better reason for catching any western tigers we see is to have a closer look to see if they're actually Canadian tiger swallowtails, because we're that close to the Canadian border that they could be there. It hasn't been, I checked John's lists and it hasn't, surprisingly, not recorded in Pend d'Oreille County. So I think it's a county record maybe waiting. And the main one that, you know, they're pretty hard to tell apart unless they're strongly marked, but the strongly marked Canadian tiger swallowtails have orange ventral hind wing marginal crescents, as the arrows are pointing to there. So instead of yellow, they'll be orange. As you can see on the bottom one, there's orange. So they're orange all the way through, and the blue is usually brighter as well. I mean, I haven't seen that many in my career, to be honest. So it will be, if you catch tiger swallowtails, it'd be worth checking, just in case there is a Canadian tiger swallowtail there. And these swallowtail, I didn't see any of those, probably past their flight period, and up there, probably only one generation, so maybe done for the year. But at First Creek, reserved similar elevation, we did see some very old looking Annis swallowtails. So there could be a few aged individuals that we might see, probably more likely to see this than two-tailed tiger swallowtail. Parnassians, I did not see any Parnassians, and at the elevation we're at in the habitat, probably Clodius is what we would see. Mountain Parnassians do occur there, but we're not really going up into their habitat area. So Clodius is quite possible, and this could be one of the species that hasn't yet fully emerged and isn't really abundant yet. So hopefully we'll see Clodius. The Pieridae, the whites and sulphurs, I only saw two whites. The ubiquitous western white was one of those. You'll see obviously western whites in almost every high elevation habitat you go to, and many lower elevation habitats too. And this was common at all the sites I visited last week. And of course, the also ubiquitous cabbage white was at one or two sites, not every site. And you know, it always is surprising to see cabbage whites in pristine environments, but they certainly do occur in those environments, not as abundantly as they do in cabbage fields or suburban gardens, but they certainly make a living in pristine environments too, presumably feeding as larvae on native crucifers. Didn't see margin whites, but it certainly occurs there, and it's quite possible we could see margin whites. Something to check for when you see a white butterfly flying around. I mean, the margin white flight and cabbage white flights are different from the western whites, much more leisurely, and so it would be a good idea to catch any whites that you see that are leisurely flying in case one of them is a margin white. Sulphurs, the dominant sulphur appeared to be Christina sulphur. I caught a few, and they all, well, most of them were Christina. There was one other which I'll talk about in a minute. And so this used to be Alexandria sulphur. I think when Dave and I were working on the book, we called it Alexandria sulphur, but it's now Christina, and it's common at all the sites. At least it was last week. So we'll almost guaranteed to see Christina sulphur. The other sulphur that is more interesting in my view is the pink edge sulphur. And it used to be very common, well, I mean, relatively common anyway, in Tiger Meadow area, and in all parts of Pend d'Oreille County in the times I used to go up there, probably a decade ago now. And so I was disappointed I only found one or two this time around in the Tiger Meadows area only. So hopefully we see them characterized by the pink edges, of course, that are more prominent than the other sulphurs, and also the pretty characteristic marking on the hind wing there. So hopefully, so this is another, you know, species I always think of when I think of Pend d'Oreille County. And so I hope I was just a bit early last week, and we do see more this weekend of pink edge sulphurs. Orange sulphur, another ubiquitous species that I did not see last week. But then again, I wasn't spending too much time looking at all the sulfurs because they all appeared to be Christina, but there could have been a few orange sulfurs mixed in between them. So I'll be surprised if they weren't there. And along with them, clouded sulfur. This is a bit of an atypical picture. I think it's a newly emerged individual that's a bit greenish, but they're often, difficult to tell apart from orange sulfur, but they don't usually have the orange flash that the orange sulfurs do, and you have less of the urethane spots that occur around the edges of the wings there. But it's always a debate between those two species, and I'm sure we'll be doing the same this weekend. I'm pretty sure we'll see both species, although, as I say, I didn't detect either of them last week, but that doesn't mean too much because I wasn't catching every sulfur I saw. Okay, moving on to the Lycaenidae, the coppers first. 4 species, and this is one of the charismatic species of the Pend d'Oreille area. I think my first ever Edith's copper actually was in the Blue Mountains, but I think the second time I saw them it was at Pend d'Oreille County, and they're common at Tiger Meadows, and they were last week. But this was one of the species that appeared to be mostly on the decline, in that a lot of them were quite worn. There were a couple of fresh individuals, but most of them were aged. And so if we see them next week at Tiger Meadows, they will be fewer. But we will still see them because there was enough fresh ones. And they're also at the other locations. The Smack Out Pass area had them as well. So we're virtually guaranteed to see these. So if you haven't seen Edith's copper, we'll see them. And this is the ventral view. So they're pretty distinctive copper. And these aren't coppers you see everywhere. So it's always good to see them. It's the first one I've seen, actually. Well, I see them every year if I go to the Blue Mountains or Pend d'Oreille County. The copper you do see everywhere, of course, from roadsides and agricultural edges and backyards and pristine habitats too, is the purplish copper. And sure enough, that was pretty abundant at most of the sites last week too. And I'm always impressed by its adaptability and its abundance and its ability to live in multiple or different types of habitats and to take advantage of the conditions it has. So we'll definitely see purplish coppers next week. And that's the upper side of a female. It's the male that has the purplish sheen, as I'm sure you're all familiar. I mean, this is a common butterfly that most of you would have seen before, even where you live. Most people, it's throughout Washington state, basically. Blue coppers, I saw this at one of the sites, the last site I mentioned on near Boundary Road. But again, it was a freshly emerged individual, and this is the species we could see more of this coming weekend, simply because they're just beginning to emerge. Always nice to see them, the blue copper, with their flashing blue as they fly, and they're pretty, characteristic flight, like a copper, obviously, and not a blue, and the very distinctive black veins on the upper side. So we should see them. And Mariposa copper. So we'll see quite a few coppers. And these were common at, I think, all the sites that I visited. So I'm pretty sure we're going to see Mariposa coppers. And there's a number of coppers that I didn't see that we should see. And this is one of them, the lilac bordered copper. I think, again, this in the category of just beginning its flight. It certainly is just beginning its flight, I think, up at the higher reaches of Risa Canyon. So this is one we could well see this weekend, newly emerged. And this is one to look out for, a bit like, the Canadian tiger swallowtail. This occurs not too many miles away. I've never seen one in my life before, but it occurs in Idaho in the Panhandle, not too many miles away to the east, and also in BC. the grey copper, Lysina Dion. So yeah, I mean, we should be looking for this. I think it's been recorded in Ponderay County. I'm not sure on that. Don't quote me on that. And so yeah, we should definitely keep an eye open for this copper, because Ponderay County is not, you know, the most covered county Lepidoptera wise. So, you know, the opportunities for discoveries, I think, are pretty high in this county. So moving on to the hair streaks, only saw 2 hair streaks. The ubiquitous, again, that word again, the grey hair streak, which of course everybody's seen the grey hair streak, mainly because it's got such a wide host range. There's not many plants it won't feed on as a caterpillar. So this is one of the reasons for its success. So it will turn up just about everywhere, since it's such a Catholic feeder. The other hair streak is not so frequently seen, and that is common. Again, I hope it will be this weekend, but last week it was really common at all the sites, particularly the smack out pass sites, but all of them really. The Sylvan hair streak, Sylvinus, very similar to the California hair streak that many of you may be more familiar with. But the California hair streak has not been recorded in Ponderay County. I think it has in the adjacent Stevens County. So it's possible the California hair streak could be there too. But the majority are going to be Sylvan hair streaks. But again, I guess we should be looking, you know, be on the lookout just in case there is California hair streaks there too. But these are delightful to see, and they're, as you can see, I actually took this picture last week. So it's feeding on the oxeye daisy at Smack Out Pass. I didn't see thicket hair streaks, but again, this may be a species that's on the cusp of emerging, and maybe we'll see it this coming weekend. Always good to see this hair streak, very distinctive, obviously, and can't mistake it for anything else. We're certainly in the right habitat for it in all the places we go to. And hedgerow hair streaks are supposed to occur in Ponderay County too, and again, that they're probably beginning their emergence as well. Moving on to the blues, I saw 4, but only 2 of those were common or sort of at the peak of their flight period. The other 2 were well past prime, so we're probably not going to see them. So there was a dearth of blues. I didn't really see many blues, but that might have been because I wasn't spending a great deal of time at each site. The greenish blue was the one I saw most of. And thanks, Dave, for the picture. It's funny when you do a presentation like this, you go through all the old pictures. You thought you had every picture of every butterfly. You soon find out you don't. And so I don't have a greenish blue. So at least I know which butterflies to take pictures of this weekend. And the western tail blue was another one that was fairly common and looked to be at the beginning of its emergence. So we'll probably see these. And silvery blue, I just saw a couple very old, very worn out silvery blues, as you'd expect at this point. The early season butterfly normally, and so they're probably at the end of the flight period, so we may not see silvery. Similarly, echo blue, I found another couple of what appeared to be very old echo blues, but they were so worn that it was a bit of a guess. And you know, Ashes blue does occur there too, so who knows, it could have been one of those. So, you know, with the heat, they may just have all died, and hopefully there'll be new blues to replace them. Things like perhaps eastern tail blue. So we have a bit of a conundrum here, separating the western tailed and eastern tailed. The scintilla is usually larger on the eastern tailed. And I know I have seen eastern tail blues in Ponderay County myself before. They're usually better marked, strongly marked than western tail blues. So we can look at tail blues and argue about their identification probably this coming weekend. Acmon blue, I didn't see any of those. We should, some of the sites we go to, and they should have been out already. So I'm not sure why I didn't see any, unless they're just not in very big numbers. Similarly, lupine blue, definitely in the right habitat, number of places. They should be there too. So again, yeah, as we all know, these two species are very similar. We could probably argue about the identification of these as well. And northern blue, I was surprised not to see northern blue, and I'm hoping that we're again, these are going to be emerging very soon. You would expect them to be one of the the common species up there in the habitats we're going to. So I was a bit surprised I didn't find any. And Bois d'Ivoire's blue, similarly, I should have seen some Bois d'Ivoire blues, particularly in the Tiger Meadows area, but I mean, they could have been there, as I keep saying, but with an army of people, hopefully we'll pick up some. Arrowhead blue apparently occurs in Pend d'Oreille County as well. I haven't seen them there, but that's one that we should be aware of and that we could possibly see. I was surprised to learn during the background for this that this is the only Euphalotes species in Pend d'Oreille County, allegedly, which, again, as I say, Pend d'Oreille County is awaiting, Lepidopteran discoveries, and I'm sure there's going to be other Euphalotes there. They just haven't been discovered. I didn't see any Euphalotes in my survey last week, so this is the one that's known to occur there, but who knows? I mean, there could be other Euphalotes species there too. So I know some of us will be keenly looking for Euphalotes. Okay, maybe I should ask if there's any questions. If you do have questions, just interrupt at any time. Do we want to stop for questions, or should I keep going?
I think just keep going. If somebody does have a question, just chime in and go ahead and ask. It's a very informal night tonight, so yeah.
Okay,
this is great.
All right. Okay, we're moving on to the brushfoots, and I saw 15 of those, which you would expect since the Nymphalidae are, one of the biggest butterfly families. This is my favorite brushfoot, not really a brushfoot, of course, but it is a nymphalid, the monarch. And it's not beyond the realms of possibility that we could see a monarch, because one was seen at Colville on July the 4th. And beyond that, many have been sighted in British Columbia this year. There's been about 3 times as many authenticated sightings in British Columbia than there have been in Washington state. So for some reason, they flew straight through Washington and landed in British Columbia. So it's really weird. It hasn't, I think it happened once before, but not for a long time. And most of our Washington records this year are in Spokane. That seems to be the hotspot, and that's usually a place where you rarely see more than 1 or 2. So it's very odd that what the monarch's doing this year, but of course every year they do something different, which is why they're the most interesting butterfly. Moving on, the crescents. Again, hate to use the word, but it describes it. Ubiquitous. My little crescents almost everywhere in many types of habitat, and they were certainly present in a number of the locations I visited last week, so we will certainly find them this week. Northern crescents, they were also at most of the sites, and again, it's not a crescent you see too often, so it's always good to see them. They're fairly distinctive, particularly the males with the dark border that they have. The female, which is down in the bottom right-hand corner, is a bit more like field crescent, which I didn't see, but we should see. But again, it has more dark, generally more black than field crescent. But the males are quite distinctive and relatively easy to recognize. These are field crescents, so you can see they're not quite as dark. And we should see field crescents. I did not see them last week. And this is, sorry, I've got this wrong. For some reason, I get field and meadow mixed up. I don't know. I mean, I think it's forgivable because a field is a meadow and a meadow is a field. And so I've been pulled up a couple of times recently for calling this meadow crescent when in actual fact it's a field crescent. But since common names are not as strictly policed as scientific names, it doesn't really matter. We'll find them in the meadows around Meadow Lake, or the fields, if you want to call them the fields. And so we should see them. I didn't see them last week, but again, this is a common species that we should see. I did see northern checker spots, I think at one or two of the sites. They appear to be fresh, so maybe they're just starting their flight. So yeah, we should see them. But they were the only checker spots I saw. And I checked the species list for Pend Oreille County, and we don't get snowberry checker spots up there, or not commonly anyway, maybe in the southern part of Pend Oreille County, and we're in the northern part, of course. But we do get up there Anicia checker spot. So if we see a checker spot, like this, a typical checker spot butterfly, is going to be Anicia. Snowberry is possible. And Ediths, I don't know about that. There's a bit of conflict about that, about whether they occur there or not. I think it's unlikely, but we probably should check all the checker spots, as we always do anyway when we find one, to make sure we get the identification right. But the northerns, I think, are going to be the ones we see most of. Oh, and then there's this other rare checker spot that, a bit like the Canadian swallowtail and the grey copper. This is another one we would be excited to see, and we should look out for, because it does occur in the Idaho Panhandle and in BC, and it has been recorded from Pend Oreille County according to Pelham's list. I don't know when, probably a long time ago, not within my memory anyway. And I've never seen one, so yeah, if you find one, let me know. But I mean, it's pretty distinctive, as you can see. So there shouldn't be any issue if we do find one, and that will be, well, it won't be a county record, unfortunately, but it will be a very exciting sighting, to say the least. Okay, getting on to the other brushfoots. Milbert's tortoiseshell, again, ubiquitous. Can I say that? Probably not really ubiquitous, because at this time of year they tend to go to the mountains, higher elevations. I think the ones I only saw a few, appear to be vagrants from lower elevations, because they look pretty warm. They weren't a new generation that probably is developing up there and could be appearing very soon. So we could see some fresh tortoiseshells, as well as some older tortoiseshells, Milbert's tortoiseshells, or as I prefer to call them, fire rim tortoiseshells. I think I like that name better. But a lot of the brushfoots I'm going to talk about now are, at the moment, mostly old generation, but there's the potential with the heat to bring out the new generation that probably right now is in the pupal stage and ready to eclose any day. And so hopefully, if there's one benefit of the heat we are getting and will get, it might bring out some new individuals of some species that I'll talk about in a minute. But as I mentioned, Lorquin's admirals already out and flying happily, abundantly in most locations, and they all look in pretty good condition, actually. So they haven't been flying long, and there may be more now this coming weekend than there was last week. Okay, before we get on to those other brushfoots I was talking about, we'll divert into the fritillaries. And this, I have to say, if I'm allowed to have a favorite non-monarch butterfly, I guess it's the Atlantis Fritillary. I don't know why, but I'm just particularly drawn to this fritillary, which is rarely seen, in Pend Oreille County and in Canada. And I know in the eastern US it's far more common, but certainly in the West, it's not a frequently seen butterfly. And I've got good memories of chasing them down back when Dave and I were writing the book, or preparing the book, and trying to source females to lay eggs, and so it was a great adventure finding them then in Ponderay County. And so this was one that I was looking forward to seeing. And that asterisk there shows that I did actually find them last week. Or to be honest, it wasn't me that found them. Annabella actually found the first one. I'd just been talking to her about why butterflies, you know, are mostly found outside, you know, not in the deep, dark forest where she wanted to go, because I guess she wanted to get in the cool. And I said, there's no butterflies down there. So, but she went off wandering into the deep, dark forest down this forest road. And she came back with an Atlantis Fritillary in her hands. She found one on the ground, newly closed, I think, because unless it was stunned or injured, it didn't look injured. So I think she found a newly emerged Atlantis Fritillary, which makes perfect sense because the caterpillars feed on violets, and where do they grow? This butterfly feeds on grow within the forest, on the forest floor. And so when they emerge, they've got to find their way out the forest. So Bella actually brought this one out to show me. It's not this individual, but I'll show you this one. This is the Atlantis Fritillary that she found last week. So that was incredible that she'd find that and being my favorite butterfly. And so what I want to point out here, I guess, is one of the diagnostic features in my mind anyway, is this black border. As you can see in some species, in some individuals, it's greater than others, but in many individuals, it's very prominent and characteristic of Atlantis, at least the butterflies that I've seen, the Atlantis that I've seen. This is the ventral side. It's usually rich, dark brown. And again, it's, you know, you need to compare it to other fritillaries to get a grasp of the color. You know, as Pelham says, you can't really describe a lot of these colors. You know, you just have to get a feel for them. But this is the one we found last week, and it's got that black border again, which, you know, the most closely related butterfly, which is also there, is the Hesperus fritillary, northwestern fritillary. We'll also see that. And this individual also has a bit of a black border, but not as consistently all the way around as Atlantis does. It's on the forewings, it's almost there. But generally it does not. And this is, in my view, you know, in my experience, this is a more heavily black bordered Hesperus than you usually see. But we will see this species too, and Hesperus we do find in other places. Of course, you don't have to go to Ponderay County to find Hesperus like you do to find Atlantis, but it's always a challenge and fun to separate these two out there, but you can with experience. So there they are side by side, and ventrally is how you separate them, and you can see they're very similar. These pictures really aren't the best pictures, I guess, in showing the differences. This Hesperus looks far more like Atlantis than most of the Hesperus that I've seen in the field are. You can begin to see the very dark brown chocolate, deep chocolate brown of Atlantis, which is more characteristic, which Hesperus doesn't usually have. It's usually suffused with the lighter scales here throughout the disc, actually, so it doesn't become as dark as Atlantis. Anyway, we will definitely see both species this weekend, and this will be one that will be good to look at in the field to separate them. A more common fritillary that's there, most of you have seen before, is the Hydaspes fritillary, and you can see the color of this, the disc of this is far different from the previous, you know, Hesperus and Atlantis. You know, the disc color is one of the, in my mind, one of the guiding features of separating fritillaries, that followed by, you know, the spots and the lighter markings, so this lighter marking here, and other things as well. But most of you have seen Hydaspes and can recognize it. Often you get a purplish sheen as well on Hydaspes. Leto, New butterfly? No, it's Great Spangled Fritillary. It's got a new name now. It's a new species, Leto Fritillary. And it was common there at the Smack Out Pass place, or just beginning to become common, I felt. There were males flying around, and actually you don't often see the females, but hopefully we do. So I've got a picture of one here, courtesy of Dave. They're beautiful, as you can see. Maybe they'll hang out in the woods along with the Atlantis Fritillary, because during the summer the females do hang out in the cooler spots. They appear to estivate. They appear to delay reproduction until late summer, early autumn, which is why you'll find mostly males dashing around outside the forest looking for females and not finding them. So to find the females at this time of year, you need to go to different places, probably in cooler locations. So we will see. I can't help calling it the Great Spangled Fritillary, but we have to get used to Leto, although it is a common name, so you can use whatever common name you want. It's just Argynis Leto. And we've got rid of Spieria now, by the way. It's all Argynis. For those that still want to call them Spieria, you're not allowed to do that anymore. Another species that we possibly could see a fritillary that doesn't actually, I don't think there's a Ponderay County record yet, but that doesn't mean to say it doesn't occur there, because it does occur in the Idaho Panhandle and in British Columbia. And as you can see from the ventral surface here, it could be confused with Hesperus, Atlantis perhaps, Serene. The number of things it could be confused with, and this may not be a typical slide. This isn't my slide. I don't have a slide of Aphrodite because I've never seen one. But one of the interesting characteristics of this species is that allegedly it has yellow-green eyes, and all our other Pacific Northwest fritillaries have blue-green eyes. And most of them, I don't spend a lot of time looking at fritillary eyes, I must admit, but the ones that I have noticed are blue. They do seem to be bluish in some way. I hadn't looked at them all species to see if that's consistent, but I'll trust what Caitlin, the Bar, and Pyle say, and other books, that this species doesn't have any hint of blue in the eyes. So we should look at the eyes of fritillaries this weekend. Serene fritillary, obviously most of us have seen serene fritillaries, and they do occur up there. I didn't see one last week, but then again, I wasn't collecting or catching many of the fritillaries beyond the ones that I saw. I was happy when I saw Hesperus and Atlantis and Leto, and really, I didn't spend as much time sampling. It's very hard to do a proper survey in just 2 days in such a bountiful area with many different habitats. Calliope fritillary occurs up there too, and this is always fairly easy to identify simply because of the elongated spots on the wings there, which are very characteristic. And many individuals have a greenish sheen as well. This one doesn't. It doesn't always happen, but Calliope is allegedly occurs up there. I don't know how common it is. I can't imagine it's very common, but one we should be aware of. The Mormon fritillaries occur there too. Again, I don't know how common they are. I mean, presumably they are reasonably common. Actually, digging back in my memory, I think I do remember them there back a decade ago. And Dave can back me up on this probably. And this is a different subspecies from the ones that you see, in central Washington, which is Washingtonia. This is Arena, which is more like the Blue Mountain version of the Mormon fritillary. So you can see from the ventral surface it is different. I don't have a comparison to show, but the other subspecies is more orange and not as artistic, if I'd like to say, as this subspecies. So if we see Mormons, and we should, they weren't around last week, it's good to look at their ventral surface and see how they compare to the Mormons that you're familiar with. Western Meadow Fritillary, I don't think I saw one of these. No, I don't have an asterisk, so I didn't see one of these. And in my haste to get this together, I couldn't find a picture, so I have to thank Dave for this picture of Western Meadow Fritillary. They should be there. They should be flying, and hopefully they will be this coming weekend. And this is the underside. I'm showing this slide here just because of the next species, which is very similar. That also occurs in Ponderay County. I don't think commonly, but it certainly has been recorded there. And so if we find Western Meadow Fritillaries, we should always do the check that I often do anyway, in the Blue Mountains and other places, to make sure it isn't the Meadow Fritillary, which doesn't have the submedium band as prominent as the Western Meadow. You can see how it's a prominent feature, whereas on this species, the Meadow Fritillary, and I think this one is actually Meadow, not a Field Fritillary. Yes, that's where I get my confusion from, I guess. Where that band is actually blends into the rest of the hindwing. So we should just check, just in case. This is how discoveries are made, through checking. Silver bordered fritillary, this was the species that we hoped we would see this weekend. And I know Jim will be disappointed to hear we probably won't, unless the weather gods are actually going to help bring out the second generation of this silver bordered fritillary. So I think the first generation's passed. There's at least one location that I checked last week where they usually occur and they weren't there. Dave knows another location that I couldn't find that maybe he will look at on Thursday. You know, their second generation probably doesn't usually start flying to the end of this month, so we might be a bit early. So, you know, I wouldn't, if I was a betting man, I wouldn't be betting we would see this weekend, but it's a possibility. And they occur in marshy, wetter areas. So there's a couple of spots where they do occur, but earlier and later in the season. So our timing's wrong for this species, but you know, we can't get the timing right for every species.
So did that one get named as well, David?
Sorry?
Did the Beloria marina get renamed as well? I thought it was Beloria saline.
Oh, yes, it's been renamed to Myrina. Yes, it's yeah, I don't know the details of that, unfortunately, but yeah, it's classified as a new species now, probably separated from the English or the European version. There's been so much taxonomic upheaval in the last 2 years that it's impossible to keep up with. I mean, a lot of the names I used last year on this talk for the Blue Mountains, I'm using different names this year. I mean, it's changed that much within a year. As some of you will know, I'm writing a book, and I've had to change most of the species in the book because their names changed from when I started the book to now I'm finishing the book just 12 months later. So it's just crazy. For another 12 months, they probably will change again. Anyway, this is the hoary comet, and this is one of the species where we might see year-old virtually individuals that eclosed last summer and then overwintered and are still hanging on after laying their eggs, and now the new generation is almost emerging and maybe is emerging. I can't remember, but I think I saw a fresh one last week along with the old ones. So we certainly saw a fresh one at First Creek last weekend. So if, you know, this is one of the species that the hot weather is very likely to bring out as new emergence. So hopefully we'll see some pristine hoary commas. California tortoiseshells is definitely one of those because the new ones were present last week. No old ones, just new ones, very fresh, newly emerged California tortoiseshells. Not huge numbers, but maybe the emergence has just begun. So we will see fresh California tortoiseshells. The ones I saw were curiously undersized, so I don't know why that was, since there's plenty of Ceanothus around, so there's no lack of food. But anyway, we'll see what we see this week. Maybe they're just the fast developers, and we'll get the larger, slower developers emerging this week. Painted lady, it's a good painted lady here, as most of you will know. Most of us have seen painted ladies, and I saw painted lady or 2 or 3 in Ponderay County last week. They were fairly worn. So again, this is a species that's now produced a new generation, at least in Oregon, and probably we're on the verge of new generation fresh painted ladies emerging, probably in quite big numbers, not just in Ponderay County, but the whole of Washington over the next couple of weeks. So watch out for them. So those are the ones I saw of angle wings, and the painted lady, of course. So I didn't see green angle wings, but they occur there too, and maybe they're just on the cusp of emergence as well. Polygonia faunus. I don't know how common they are there, but presumably reasonably so. So this may be another species we see. Satire comma. I didn't see a lot of stinging nettles. These use stinging nettles as a host plant, but again, these are pretty widespread and will turn up in many locations. So, and again, they follow the same pattern of new emergence happening around about now. So we should see fresh ones. Aureus anglewing also occurs up there too. This is an anglewing from the Blue Mountains. There's a couple of different forms. I'm not sure if the one up there is as black as this one. It will certainly be darker. So I didn't check that out to see which version it was, but you can always tell Aureus by its mostly dark underside. And again, we should check all the angle wings we see just to see which species. It could be any one of the ones that I've just mentioned. Morning cloaks fall in the same category too. All the cloaks now are last year's cloaks are very old and jaded and battered. I saw one last week that had the yellow band non-existent. The wings started at the blue dots. It worn away the entire yellow band. But you know, these are year-old butterflies. So the new morning cloaks are just ready to emerge. And if we see morning cloaks this coming weekend, they will be pristine and very good for photography if you can get them to sit down and hang around for a while. They're, you know, this time of year they're a bit like the Garita Fritillary in that they don't hang around in the heat for very long. They tend to estivate, hang out in the cooler areas for a while, at least until it cools off a bit, and then go back and then go into hibernation. So they don't do a great deal for the rest of this calendar year, except stock up on food. The Red Admiral, or Red Admiral, if you still want to call it Red Admiral, this is we're having another good year for Red Admirals in Washington and the Pacific Northwest generally. They're turning up all over the place, not in huge numbers, but they seem to be scattered here and there. I didn't see any in Ponderay County, but this year is a butterfly that will turn up randomly just about anywhere. Since they are migrants, they're scattered over the landscape. So quite possible to see Vanessa atalanta. This is another Ponderay special that I was hoping I would see last week. But again, it falls in the category of potentially emerging this week with the heat, because its development, caterpillar pupal development, must be almost complete. Certainly by the end of July, they will be flying. And they're usually quite common in the Tiger Meadows area, the forested areas along the forest roads. They'll fly in front of you and settle on the roads, and probably in the other locations we're going to as well, Smack Out Pass area. I think Dave said they occur there as well. So hopefully we do see this large, rarely seen tortoiseshell. I mean, really, you have to come up to northern Washington and into Canada to actually see these butterflies. And of course, Dave and I did that for the book, and to rear them, we had to come here to Ponderay County to find them. So it's always great to see them again, and certainly hope we see them. And they will be pristine, of course, and beautiful condition if we do see them this coming weekend. West Coast lady, another migrant that a few have been seen in Washington, not many, but again, less likely than painted lady, but again, a migrant that can turn up virtually anywhere, since they are migratory. And in recent years, we've seen more West Coast ladies in Washington than painted ladies, but I think the reverse will be the case this year. And also American lady, I pulled this in because I know at least one has been spotted in Pend Oreille County in recent times. So again, these can turn up anywhere. I've seen them in the mountains for sure, in the Cascades, just randomly in recent years. As migrants, they just cover the landscape, and it's possible that we can see one of these too. Excuse me. Okay, moving on to the browns or the satyrs. The common wood nymph is quite common up there. I found it in a number of locations, appear to be fairly fresh, newly emerged individuals. So I think beginning of the flight period, they can be confused with the dark wood nymph, which at the moment, last week, was by far the more abundant species and the more distributed in amongst the sites I went to. These are smaller and darker, as their name suggests. And once you see both species, they're fairly easy to separate, as you can see. So we're likely to see both of these. So again, there's a number of species that have sister species that you need to look closer to see which it is that you have. And so that's why we carry nets, or we take cameras so we can actually separate these things. And sometimes netting them is the only way to do that. The ochre ringlet, another name change species, not Thalia anymore, but California. The ochre ringlet, ubiquitous. I can use the word for this species because it truly is. I saw a number of individuals last week. These have multiple generations through the year, through the season, from spring to autumn. So I think they might be on the wane, waiting for a new generation. So there may be more this coming week. We'll see. The Butler's Alpine allegedly occurs in Pend Oreille County. I don't know if Dave Nunnally's seen it, but I haven't seen it up there myself. But this is another brown butterfly. In flight, it can look similar to a wood nymph. So they are darker and blacker, especially when they're newly emerged. So, but another one that probably need to net to be sure of what you have. And the Crixus arctic also occurs in Pend Oreille County. I haven't seen it there. And again, it's a bit like the Great Arctic, very similar, of course, as you can see. And it's also like the Great Arctic and being somewhat biennial, but not every other year. And but not to the same extent. And I'm not sure which is its favoured year. But this is a possible species we could see. Okay, moving on to the last group. And as I said earlier, this location we're going to is good for the fritillaries and the skippers. That's what I think of when I think of Pend Oreille County, because of the species we find there that in most cases or some cases are species we don't find elsewhere. Or rarely. I mean, the Garita Skipperling is one of those. You can find them elsewhere, of course, but not commonly. And they're skipperlings because they're tiny, smaller than your average skipper. I mean, for those of you who thought skippers were small, skipperlings are smaller. And this is our native skipperling species. And so I saw that last week. It was common at all sites. They like moist meadows. The larvae feed on grasses. Most skippers do, of course, some exceptions, but this skipper does, skipperling. And that's Garita again. And notice that it's a brown skipperling. And that's important to recognize because there's another species that we will confuse it with it's occurring in the same locations, same places, alongside at the same time. And this is the European skipperling. And it's more orange than brown, as you can see. And again, I was sad to find I don't have a good picture myself. So this is taken from the web. But you can see that it's orange compared to our Garita, our native Garita, which is brown. And the undersides, you can see there, that theme carries on where, the Garita is browner than the European. And there's some other differences too, like the venation on Garita stands out when they're fresh. I mean, fresh individuals. But the problem is when you've got, aging populations of both, you don't know what you have then, because they're both the same size. They don't have different colored eyes or anything unique like that. And so, unless they're fresh, good news is at the moment they are fresh, or they were last week. And I guess a week is a long time in a skipperling's life, but hopefully there's more emerging as we speak. We are guaranteed to see both of these species. And the European skipperling is, an invasive species, if you want to call it a butterfly invasive. It comes from Canada, or actually comes from Europe originally, invaded Canada. I'm not sure if it was, I think it was accidentally introduced and has worked its way across Canada over 50 years or more, and then finally, is now moving south through Washington. It's not going very fast. I don't think it's reached Oregon yet, but it's, a few years ago, I think a decade ago, when Dave and I were working on the book and going to Pend Oreille County, it was a new record at that time. When we found it, it was a new thing. It had been found previously on the west side, coming down from on the I-5 corridor, but now it's coming down on this side of the state as well. And I think, I don't know, I might be wrong, but I think John Bauman has seen it close to Spokane as well. So it's moving around a little bit, not hugely. And I guess the good news is, some people were concerned that it might outcompete the Garita skipperling, but from what I saw last week, they were both doing well in the same habitat. They both feed on grasses, so I don't think that's going to be a limiting resource. And maybe they have slight differences in their habitat preferences, or their lifestyle that allows them to live together. That appears to be the case so far, and hopefully will continue. So the skipperlings are one of the unique things we'll see at Pend Oreille County. Another interesting species is the long dash. And again, a lot of these skippers and skipperlings look very similar. And this is where we do need a net to catch them and to put them in a jar to look at them, because, and to get a good picture like this, I cheated. This was indoors. I reared this individual. So to get a picture like this outside is not easy. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm sure some of you will. But, once their markings start to fade, a lot of them can look very much the same. So this is the long dash, Pileatis mystic. I don't know why it's not called the mystic skipper. It sounds a lot better. But this is larger than the skipperlings. This is a proper skipper. So if this is going to be confused with something, I think it's going to be the woodland. Some of you are probably looking at it and thinking it looks like a woodland skipper. And it does a bit, except it's bigger on the whole. But sometimes you get quite large woodland skippers, and sometimes you get small long dashes. So again, it can be a little bit of a problem. But Dave Nunnally is more experienced with these than I am. And there may be some color variations too. I think they're a bit darker as well sometimes than that picture shows. More confusion, tawny edge skipper. This is another species we'll see there, Pileatis themysticals. It's pretty nondescript in pattern and markings, as you can see. And again, if it begins to fade, this is a fairly, I think it's a reared individual that's not too old anyway. And so, it probably doesn't get much better than this. But as you can see, the overall color is a lot darker than the previous species or the skipperlings. And so that's a guide. And so I saw all these last week, and I hadn't seen these for a decade. And so, but I still managed to identify them mostly through the color, overall color, and size. I don't think the woodland skippers had emerged there last week. I didn't see any. They could be by now. I'm pretty sure they will be with the heat. So we could have woodland skippers in the mix just to add confusion. So it's going to be a very confusing weekend. This is not a confusing skipper. This is the Peck skipper, which has had its name change. It used to be Peckius, which sounds appropriate. It's now Chorus. And I don't know the details of that. Maybe it's just our species on the west side of the continent that has changed its name. But as you can see, the markings are very characteristic. You can't really confuse this skipper with any other, unless it's worn and faded, of course. And I didn't have a good picture, so again, this is from the web. So these are the good skippers. These are the skippers that I don't see very often that I'm pleased to see. The skipperlings, the long dash, the tawny edged, and the pecks. And then we'll also see the roadside skipper, which some of many of you have seen before, but it's all it doesn't occur everywhere. It's always a surprise when it turns up, and it surprised me last week. It was there. I thought for a minute it was Themistocles, I think, that one, but it was smaller, and it was definitely Amblyscurtes vialis, the common roadside skipper. So that's there in the mix. Western branded skipper probably will be this week. It wasn't last week. They're just beginning to emerge in many locations. So I think it will be there. And of course, as I mentioned, the ubiquitous woodland skipper that will very likely be there next week to add confusion to the skipper mix. And that's another woodland skipper, which is, a lot of the locations it occurs at, that's typical of its form. So I don't know what woodland skippers look like actually in Ponderay. So I'm glad we're going to have lots of experts there next week to help sort out the skipper conundrum. Another one that does occur there that would add to the conundrum is the dun skipper, and they may be on the brink of emerging too. So that certainly would add to the mix and add to the confusion, because they are basically not a well-marked skipper. So we've got a lot of skippers that are not well marked, except for Pecks or Chorus or whatever it's called. So yeah, it could be fun. And then there's the easy skippers. Common checkered skipper, which I didn't see last week, but most of us have seen this again in throughout the state, and it does occur up there. Very recognizable, of course. It's had its name changed to Burnsius. The genus has actually changed. And then the two-banded checkered skipper, it's actually remained in the old genus, Purgus, which is very similar to the common checkered skipper, but just smaller and slightly different black and white markings, and more often seen in high elevation areas. So this could certainly be seen. I didn't see it last week, but certainly could be there in the mix. And Arctic skipper is supposed to occur there too. We may be past the flight period for that now. It tends to be an earlier skipper. I didn't see any last week, but one to be aware of. I didn't see any dusky wings last week, which is a bit of a surprise. Maybe they're not dusty. It's not dusky wing heaven up there, I don't think. And there's only 3 species that probably will be there. Perseus, which we see, in many locations throughout the state. Pacuvius, and I think this is a Pacuvius skipper. Very hard to tell apart, at least for me. Although in these pictures it looks quite distinctive, but it's never as simple as these pictures are suggesting. And finally, a dreamy dusky wing, which is more easily recognizable, that occurs there too. So that's the skippers and the dusky wings, and that's the entire complement of what I saw and what we're possibly going to see. I probably have missed out some species, and perhaps we'll find something I haven't mentioned. I hope not. Well, I hope we do actually, because it's always good to have a surprise and to have something new. But I think we're going to have a good weekend. With the weather warming up as it has, I think we'll see a burst of activity. If my experience of the weekend is any guide, then I think we will. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Butterfly related questions or the habitat related, or any questions.
So
I got a
do
question,
have a
Dave.
question.
Oh,
Go ahead.
this is the first I've heard you working on a book.
Yes,
What's the book about?
The Lives of Butterflies.
There we go.
It's all about their lives. It's for the general public, so it's pretty basic, but it's stuff that you don't usually read about in books. And it's been a piece of work to do it, to be honest. It's going to be published by Princeton, and it should be out in November. I was commissioned to do it, and I naively thought I could write it just as I wanted to write it, in the style I wanted to write it. But turns out that they didn't approve of my colloquialisms and things speech I used to connect to the public wasn't in their game plan. So it's been modified somewhat, but I'm still happy with it. There's lots of good pictures in it, and I'm excited to see it come out the end of this year.
Look forward to seeing it. Look forward to talking to you about it.
Yeah, you're going to give a presentation about it at one of our WOW meetings, aren't you, this coming season?
Yep, I'll be happy to.
Great, thank you. I had a question about the changes of the taxonomy. Is that all because of DNA, or are there other things that are going on as well?
Yeah, principally DNA genomic analysis, principally by one group in Florida that seems to be coming up with something new every month, and some changes are not fully embraced by everybody. Some are, some not, and so there's a bit of pushback and it's back and forth, as I said. So some things have been reversed from what they were a year ago, but yeah, it's all largely DNA based. So yeah.
Okay, any other questions, comments, thoughts?
David, what do you do in your spare time?
I don't have any spare time. What's that? So that's why the book's called The Lives of Butterflies. It's my life, really. Well, that and other entomological aspects.
Well, let's see. You did the scouting up in Ponderay County last week, and then you led a field trip on Saturday, and now you're giving this presentation today. I think you need a break.
I'm going to have a break between now and Saturday. Yeah. Well, I hope you can do some little scouting on Thursday, just on Friday, just to tie up the loose ends about what we do on Sunday.
I'm thinking I need yet another day because there's so many places I want to look at.
You have to be targeted. Just look at the best places, or that look best on Google Earth.
That's right. Yeah.
Are you basing your scouting on past trips, Dave, or maps, or how are you figuring out where to go?
Oh, a little of everything. We've been up there a number of times, of course, and but there's some places like David found these areas on Smack Up Pass Road that I haven't been to, and sound like there's some good areas there. Also, I'd really like to find a high elevation place because it's going to be pretty hot, and it would be really nice to be able to get up at 7,000 feet, but I'm not sure I have enough time to really look those places over.
Right. Well, Cheryl is asking. Cheryl, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I just wondered, is there going to be an optional trip on Monday?
I'm not doing it.
Maybe you can do scouting for the next trip up to Selkirk's, Cheryl.
You don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions, comments? All right, well, David James, thank you so much for your trip last week and for giving this presentation. I know you've got a lot going on, and we really appreciate you doing that. And Dave and Joe, thank you for planning to go up and do a little bit more scouting. We're really grateful to you dedicated professionals who are willing to do this for our group. So thank you very much.
By the way, that one American Lady record up in Ponderay County, Joe was the one that found it.
Oh, really? Wow.
High five for Joe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay, well, I think that about wraps it up then. Thank you so much to the Daves and to Joe and for everyone participating tonight. And we'll look forward to seeing you this weekend. So bring plenty of water and all the thing, the logistical things that Jim talked about, a chair if you have one and all that. And we'll look forward to seeing you on Friday. So thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
David.
Thank you, David. And Dave.